Hello, everyone. I am back to dieting. I am very hungry. Coffee helps with that. But while I'm enjoying my afternoon coffee, I wanted to make a quick video in response to a series that came out last week by Lance of the Lone Caner. If you watch this channel and you somehow don't know the Lone Caner, it's kind of one of the OGs of online rum commentary, rum blogs. Lance Surujbally has been running this thing, I don't know, since the Triassic or something. He's been around forever. And just last week he put out a video series called Planteray Isn't Going Anywhere. And granted the title, you might be confused. You might be forgiven for thinking that this is a kind of defense of Maison-Ferrand and Planteray. Because, why are people being mean to the gigantic multinational corporation is kind of an established genre these days. Why hasn't anyone thought of the feelings of the poor multinational corporation? That's not what this is. That's not what this series is. Especially if you go to the fourth part, Lance is actually fairly critical of the Planteray folks and Maison-Ferrand. He at one point alludes, I think, to its beginnings as a cognac producer, which essentially amount to leveraging a family out of their business and out of their own name. He is quite critical of their questionable finishes. He is quite critical of their practice of adding sugar, which he calls dosage. And just to be clear, dosage is a word we use which means added sugar. Why do we use it? It's very strange why we use it in rum, because it's not really a cognac term. The only place you really see it is in champagne, where it's a technical term, because in champagne there's different kinds of added sugar that do different things. That's a long discussion. Anyways, it means added sugar, and most of the time we should just say added sugar. End footnote. He seems quite critical of their stance trying to undermine the current Jamaica geographical indication, rules for what has to go into a bottle of Jamaican rum. And he also seems relatively critical of their attempts to undermine the current Barbadian attempt to establish a GI of roughly the same kind. He seems to have a very good laugh at the whole name change fiasco, the plantation to Planteray name change, which took an inordinate amount of time. So he does not seem to be, like he complains about their marketing, their supposed transparency. He does not seem to be really defending these folks. So you have to ask, okay, what is this 40 minutes of YouTube video? What is this doing? I mean, really, it seems to be attacking the people, attacking Planteray, which seems a little odd when you're roughly speaking on their side. But let's get into this. Let's talk about the points you want to make. And I did watch this a couple of days ago. I made some notes for myself, but it's not completely fresh in my mind. So, and also I'm starving, so please forgive me if I'm a little foggy. I mean, okay, so what points does Lance want to make against the people who are mad at Planteray? He seems to be really upset that people are just very angry at them. He seems to not understand the rage, and he's mad at the anger. He's mad at the particular outrage. He's mad at what he calls the lack of objectivity and the irrationality. And to that, I want to talk for a minute, and I know it's pretentious, But let's talk about Aristotle. Let's talk about the Nicomachean Ethics on the question of anger and rationality. So this is book 2. This is the place where he talks about virtues of character, which are not the only kinds of virtues, but they are still intimately related to reason. You have to get up to book 6 to get to that part, and God help you, because book 6 is a beast. Anyways, this is the part where he defines virtues of character most of the time as a mean between a deficiency and an excess, between two extremes, basically. It's not, it's always a very relative thing and a very situational thing, but it is kind of thought of as something landing in the middle between too much and too little. And there is a virtue, thus a mean, related to anger. So I'm just going to read this thing. Even with anger, there's an excess and deficiency and a mean. And he says these are virtually nameless. You don't really have good Greek words for what these look like. But he says, since we call the person in between the extremes even-tempered, let us call them mean, even temper. Mild-mannered might be a better translation of the Greek. Of those at the extremes, let the one who is excessive be called quick-tempered, and the vice quick-temper, while he who is deficient is, as it were, slow-tempered, and his deficiency slow-temper. So, did you catch that? What Aristotle is saying, and this is the guy who essentially established the norms for talking about rationality in philosophical discourse. He is saying that, yes, it is a vice to be too quick to anger. If you get angry in the wrong situations, you get angry too much, you get mad too often, that is a character flaw. But being angry as such is not a bad thing. In fact, if you are angry in the right situation, the right amount, that is virtuous. Mild-mannered doesn't mean you don't get angry. It means you get angry at the right thing. And even more so than that, not getting angry when the situation calls for it is equally a character flaw. It is a vice. Now, I say all this, and I bring up good old Aristotle to point out that, if you are confronted with a situation as a consumer where a product that you like and you care about seems to be having its integrity challenged by someone, and even more so that there seem to be people in the conversation who are defenders of this, attack, who seem to be paying off by the attackers, that seems like a situation where some anger is completely rational, where even if you were a good, mild-mannered person, you can get a little ticked. You can get a little peeved at that. Now, you could respond to that, and there's a place in here. There's a place in here where Lance talks about how I don't think I fully understood his point on this, but he seems to be saying, if you are just some person on the internet and you don't actively live in Barbados or Jamaica or whatever, you don't get to have a say in the situation with the GIs and the various legal wrangling going on. Because you don't live there, right? So maybe, there's another argument that maybe you shouldn't even be getting angry about. You shouldn't be arguing about this on the internet. And I don't think I fully captured his point while watching this, but if that's his opinion, I think I just have to totally disagree. Consumers should be able to have strong opinions on the production processes of whatever the heck they happen to be buying. Consumers should not just be pigs sitting in front of the trough, waiting for the slop to be poured in, and at most picking out the bits of the slop that they seem to personally like best. There should be some proactivity going on. I certainly wouldn't question if someone was looking at current American policy and having strong reactions to that, strong opinions about that, and maybe curbing their purchasing decisions in certain directions as a result. I can't really object to that. Now, and I don't think... I think it's perfectly fair for rum consumers to have opinions about the legal status of the rums that they enjoy. Now, the people of Barbados or Jamaica and the businesses there and the governments can tell those consumers to go screw off. That's perfectly legitimate. And that's part of the game, right? I mean, all this is fair. All I'm saying is there's a right to complain. And honestly, like, if you're going to challenge foreigners coming in to tell, Barbadians or Jamaicans what the laws should be for how they should be making their rum, honestly, people complaining on the internet would be the last people I would be complaining about. Anyhow, Lance also wants to say that if we're going to be angry, we should at least be more consistent in our anger. So, there seems to be a special kind of mad reserved for Planteray, and specifically and also very specifically for particular writers who are on the Planteray payroll. And he seems to think this is not fair. And I agree with him. We should be equally critical and mad, as the case may be, rationally mad, at everyone else on the Planteray payroll. That seems fair. And yeah, okay, other producers out there, other big multinational corporations, might have to be big mad at them too. It's not something, I'm not super duper informed about this, but we really should think about if ultimately what we're worried about is the integrity of the product and the let's say the economic and the ethical conditions of production, we should be worrying about that in the case of Diageo with Zacapa in Guatemala as well. What is going on with what the heck is going into that stuff? And also, are any of the benefits of selling that product filtering back into the communities making it at all? Same with Brown-Forman, Venezuela, right? Diplomatico. We should absolutely be fair in all of our mad. I think Lance is perfectly right on this. Now, one last point I did going back to Aristotle for a minute, you could say, I think this would be valid. Well, okay, you have a right. Maybe it's perfectly right and rational to get mad, to get a little bit peeved, faced with these kinds of situations. But you're still getting excessively mad. It's still a vice. And he talks about relationships being destroyed and that sort of thing. And that's a fair point. I don't think the response to that is to sort of finger wag and say, oh, you guys are not being objective. I don't even think it's to say, hey, y'all, we should tone this down to a 7. We're at a 10 right now. I think the appropriate response to that would be to say, this isn't getting you, being big mad isn't getting you what you want. It isn't getting you it isn't constructive. And that kind of objection, if that's what Lance wants to do with this, I'm still not totally sure. If that's what Lance wants to say, that's a good point. Well, let's come back to that, because there's another point he makes about ad hominem attacks. He's really worried about lots of ad hominem attacks being made against plantation and pro-plantation people. I'm not going to quote I will put my Aristotle away. I'm not going to quote text here. I do want to say, ad hominem is a formal fallacy. It's a formal argumentative fallacy, and essentially it consists in dismissing or taking yourself as having argued, rendered inadequate an argument made by someone by pointing out something wrong with the person making the argument rather than pointing out something wrong with the argument. That is what ad hominem is. Attacking the person rather than attacking the argument they are making and taking that as a dismissal of that argument. It's important to understand this because that is a different kind of thing from just being mean. You can be mean on the internet and still be right. I mean, what I mean is, so if I were speaking to you and I said, you loser, you accept that P implies Q, and you moron, you also accept that P is the case. So therefore, you truly poorly dressed person. I'm terrible at insults. I'm sorry. You have to accept that P is the case too. I am being a jerk. I am being super duper mean, but I've just also presented a valid argument. And that is kind of what I see. I don't go onto the Reddits nearly as often as Lance does, I'm sure. I try to stay away from there as much as possible these days. But that is what I have seen more often than not. People are making perfectly valid arguments. They're just sometimes being a little mean about it. They're being a little snarky. They're being a little trolly. And that might have its own problems. And we will talk about that. But it's not technically an ad hominem. Now, what else? What other kind of situation? What about something that comes up a lot? Calling someone, in so many words, a shill. Is calling someone a shill an ad hominem? Not necessarily. I mean, it can be. It might be, depending on the situation. So, for example, if you were to call me a shill, I mean, so I've accepted samples in the past from Alembique Serrano, right? And I've said their stuff is good. And you might point to me and say, well, you're a shill, we can't trust anything you're saying. That's not technically an ad hominem because I'm not... When I say Alembique Serrano good, that's not an argument per se. That is a statement of witness. I am reporting an experience, a personal experience I've had. And you pointing at me, it is ad hominem in the sense that it's at the person, which is Latin. You pointing at me and saying, you're a shill, is not challenging an argument I'm making. It's basically saying, my reports, my witness is not credible, which is just a different kind of thing. It's still not, formally speaking, an ad hominem. And again, I think this covers a lot of cases. I just don't... Are real ad hominems out there? I'm sure they are. I'm sure they really do happen. I'm sure arguments really do just get dismissed because, the other person is just on the wrong side or bad or something like that. But it's not something I see most of the time. I think if you look at the context, you will see they're presenting an argument alongside, or there's a good, valid argument elsewhere in the thread, or it's really attacking, the credibility of the person making a kind of report of experience, not necessarily an argument. And when it does happen, it might just be an expression of exasperation that these people have, strong feelings, maybe rightly so. And the conversation doesn't seem to be moving, very possibly because some of the people on the other side of the conversation are being paid not to budge. It probably does happen. I think it's a very small minority of cases. I mean, if I don't want to be cute here. I don't want to seem too cute here, but if I were to look at the situation and try to find an actual ad hominem, I mean, dismissing someone's argument because they're mad or because they're irrational or not being objective or because they're acting like, self-righteous know-it-alls. That if that is the argument, that's kind of an ad hominem. Sorry. But, I mean, to go back to the point of, most of what you see, I think, is just people reacting to a very frustrating situation by being mean, by being snarky, by being trolly, and so forth and so on. And again, strictly speaking, not an ad hominem. What you can then ask is, well, is that getting you what you want? What is that accomplishing? And I think, to some extent, that is in the 40 minutes that Lance is talking. That is the big point he can make. I think that is his strongest argument. Are you actually? What are you accomplishing? It may feel good to be big mad at Planteray. It may feel good to dunk on them. What are you actually accomplishing? What do you want? Because the title of this series he put up, Planteray isn't going anywhere, is correct. They aren't going anywhere. Like we can talk about counterfactuals. Would I have preferred if the West Indies rum distillery and therefore stakes in Long Pond and Clarendon had gone to someone else? And Lance talks about that. Yeah. Gun to my head, maybe I would have. I do think like Lance maybe gives them too much credit for putting money into West Indies rum distillery and improving the place. I think I've had friends who've actually been down there and they don't see a whole ton of investment going on. I think the market for rum just took an upturn. I think that's what happened. They just kind of rode that wave. So they're not going anywhere. And those of us who are, let's say, frustrated with Maison Ferrand's behavior and Planteray's behavior, like, what do we want? What do we do? What do we do in response? Well, I want to bring up something I picked up from 90s anime. Let us go back to 90s anime. Let us go back to the 13th episode of Neon Genesis Evangelion, titled Lilliputian Hitcher, arguably the worst episode of that series. And that series had some ups and downs. The scenario for the series is the good guys, their base and their big robots, are attacked by a kind of living computer virus. And it looks like all is lost. It's going to, blow everything up until Ritsuko, the kind of head, nerd of the series, figures out, okay, this virus is evolving. It is smart. It evolves in response to its environment, to the various challenges it gets presented with. So what we have to do, we can't really beat it, properly speaking. We can't destroy it. We can't blow it up. What we can do is kind of manipulate its evolution. We can kind of chart its development into a direction that ultimately makes it benign. So it doesn't go away, but it ceases to want to blow us up. Basically, it decides that it would be better to live, peacefully within this and with all the rest of us, rather than being hostile and trying to destroy everything for its own benefit. Let us call that approach the Ritsuko Gambit. If you were confronted with, a foe you can't beat, really. Maybe you can at least, but they're sort of intelligent and they adapt. Maybe you can at least guide them in a direction where they behave better. Not to say that Planteray it adapts and evolves with the same adeptness of the Evangelion computer virus thing. They do not. The fact, like the whole name change thing, shows a certain clumsiness on their ability to adapt to the market. But they do adapt to the market, and that is the point. So I'm not saying be nice. I'm saying be strategic. There's a point in his discussion where Lance says, I forget, he makes a distinction between bias and preference, and I don't really. I think like a bias is just a preference that's too strong or something like that. Lance really seems to be against strong feelings, at least strong feelings on the part of public speakers, reviewers, and people on the Reddits. But beyond the distinction between bias and preference, I think people like me who are viewers and people on maybe commenting on this stuff on the Reddits and trying to steer the conversation in a particular direction, I think what is necessary is strategy. So, for example, when I made a video on the Planteray name change a while back, one thing I pointed out was that if Planteray really, really wanted to stick it to their old enemy, Richard Seal, over at Foursquare, if they really wanted to piss him off, what they would do is make a single estate Barbadian rum that was even more Barbadian than what was happening at Foursquare or Mount Gay, and really, really stick it to him that way. If Planteray were to put out a rum like that, would the haters still be mad at it? Would they still, be complaining and upset? Yeah, absolutely. I think they would be. Still be whining and complaining and being mad. But I would buy it if it were well priced, which is another question. I mean, one of the complaints I always have about Planteray, and it kind of gets lost in the the ethics and the political stuff, is I just don't think their rums have very good QPR. I just don't. I think they consistently get beaten by other offerings elsewhere on the shelf. Anyways, but back to, if Planteray put out a hardcore single estate Bajan rum in total accordance with strong Barbados GI, they sold it for a good price, I would buy that thing. I would review it, and if it was good, I would go tell everyone else. I would, be transparent about, the other factors about the company that might influence people's buying decisions, because I think that kind of goes hand in hand with being a helpful consumer advocate. But I would give the damn thing an honest review. And if it were good, maybe the haters are still going to be mad, but put out a couple of releases like that. Maybe start to say, you know what, we here at Planteray, we are on the side of strong GIs. Not only are we for them, we are going to be the best damn producers within that GI. I mean, if they did that, eventually you start to get into a tit-for-tat situation with the consumer. Eventually you start to get into a virtuous cycle. I don't know. Maybe the folks at Planteray really are just pure evil. But you can divide that out of the equation. All you need to do is just respond to the movements on the board. And if they make the right kind of movements, I want them to be rewarded for that. Incidentally, it's somewhere Lance also makes the point that, hey, maybe the other distilleries on Barbados should make accommodations to Planteray. And I think, with all due respect to Lance, I think he's just, wrong on this. There's an open letter these folks have written to Maison Ferrand, pointing out that they have been trying to get a deal. They had been trying to get a deal together, and the reason why they are on these sort of onerous legal path towards a GI that they are currently on is because Planteray wanted no part of it. Like, they're the only distillery on Barbados that just has no interest in a strong GI. So, like what? Point being, the other distilleries are not the ones holding up the accommodation. Anyways, so but to go back to the point, I think this is not like some kind of zero-sum game. This is if Maison Ferrand and Planteray put out a new line of rums, whether it be like a new line of Planteray or just an entirely new brand, which was really like hardcore, 100% Barbados, 100% Jamaica, 100% Fiji, whatever, like really, really emphasizing, integrity and purity of expression. They put that out there on the shelves. I think they would make some fans. I think they would make a lot of money doing it that way. Even Stades, a brand I've been keeping my eye on for the last couple of years, because I would, if I could, I mean, it's the official bottling line of the largest distillery on Barbados. If I could get my hands on, what is it, the beach rum, the beach vat, something like that. If I could get my hands on that, I would absolutely review it. Although I can't find it for some reason. And this is footnote. It is incredibly weird to me that Stades, this brand, which again is the official bottling line for the West Indies Rum Distillery, the largest rum distillery on Barbados, and I think maybe the largest in the Caribbean. Like, that brand exists, and it is sort of under the umbrella of this company that has amazing distribution and everything else, and I cannot get a hold of it. Like, what the hell is going on? End footnote. So I would buy the beach. Hand on this very stained table right here, I would buy the beach vat. I would review it. I would give it a fair score, and if it was good, I would tell all y'all to go buy it. Tit for tat, right? On the other hand, I would not bother reviewing the other one, the one that has added sugar, because I don't think that's going to be worth my money or my time, and it's not strategic to give that time. So that's the strategy. It's not to sort of try to dunk on Plantation or to bias for or against Plantation. You want to create an environment with your own commentary, your own reviews, and what you're telling other people, and the arguments you're making. You want to create an environment that is amenable to, rums presented with integrity, with presented well, without adulteration, and with a strong identity, probably a geographical identity, and an environment that is contrary-wise hostile to, sugared up, processed crap from nowhere. We want to push the evolution in a particular direction. And so, and by the way, Lance makes a point about ethics and law, basically. So I don't want to say, I don't want to preclude the laws of the Caribbean or other places in the world from getting ahead of Plantation on this and encouraging good behavior. Lance says that the behavior of corporations, ethically speaking, tends not to go beyond the laws required of them. And, that's probably true to a large extent. And so I would absolutely be in favor of laws in rum production, encouraging let's say, better behavior and better standards. But a lot of this, I think, comes down to just the strategy we take up in our online discussions of this stuff. What do we want? Well, we want a really good rum market. How do we get there with sort of plantation and not just Planteray, and not just Planteray, but all these other kind of actors, Diageo and so on, kind of in the sphere? Well, you act strategically. You reward the things that you want to reward, and you kind of bash the things and warn other consumers away from the things that you don't want to be there in the environment any longer. The Ritsuko Gambit, if you like. So that is, I mean, that's, I guess, what I wanted to say. It's not, I'm not entirely sure I've done justice to Lance's point, but I mean, he's absolutely right that Planteray doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. But at the same time, I think we as consumers can start to take actions to where maybe at the end we won't have to be so mad anymore. And that's what I got. And I'm done with my coffee. Thank you for watching this entirely too long rambly response. And cheers.